Good afternoon, race fans, and welcome back to TRTM for today's coverage of the penultimate round of HCCL's Multiclass Championship here in Season 3, Round 7. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here on our second to last stop in this fantastic championship at the home of possibly the most revered circuit in motorsports history. Opened in 1927 and coined by three-time Formula One World Champion Sir Jackie Stewart as the Green Hell. Welcome to the Nords. 170 turns and 15.7 miles of FIA Grade 3 in this combined use N24 layout introduced in 2002, with the original Nordschleife being constructed way back nearly 100 years ago to the day. Now, of course, the Grand Prix layout, of which it runs in parallel to, was introduced in the mid-80s. These two married together to form the basis of the N24 layout in 2002. This is the Holy Grail, regarded by many as one of the big three of motorsports venues worldwide. It holds legendary status both as an endurance venue and as a racing venue in general. Very few do not know of the Nürburgring Nordschleife. It is simply by nature that drivers would find themselves back here in the Green Hell. It has been a bit of a confusing last week, with technical difficulties taking us away from the opportunity to have this run on schedule. You'll find that looking at the calendar, things are a little bit skewed, as we should have ran this on February 28th, but due to server issues with the Assetto Corsa Competizione, we were unable to do so. So March 7th is today, and that sadly means that this calendar isn't working as it should be. It will be March 14th where you'll see the final round at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Bringing us in then to the penultimate round of the championship after a breakaway success in Snetterton by Marcelin Broschtuli in GT3 and another win for Matthias de Munster. Let's get a look at the championship standings before we get into the session at hand today. Taking a look then first off with the GT3s, we find Mr. Scallops at the forefront of this championship ahead of Dion Helgelien by a matter of 14 points. Stephen Sutton in third place with Anthony Valorio in fourth. Looking further down the line, Luca Tamburini in fifth with Giacomo Marianelli in sixth. Pascal Stoltz in seventh place with 49 points with Jaguar as he makes a return into this round after a hiatus. Alexander Hivrich in eighth with Corey Aiken ninth. And after his debut round, mind you, in Snetterton I suppose I should say a fortnight ago now, Broschtuli in 10th with 32 points. Taking a look then at the standings for the GT4s, Vladislav Mizin leads with 145 points over that of Matthias de Munster. Those two separate as it stands there by a factor of 7 points. But you'll note that Mizin has registered now DSQ in this championship, leaving the throne open for that of de Munster. Tom Wells in third place with Shemak Sulim in fourth, Asahi Ota in fifth, and Marco Gaioliolo in a joint sixth place there with Dennis Gonzalez in what is technically seventh, but of course a joint sixth. So eighth place down to a provisional eighth for that of Matthew Copsey, Felix Kobler in ninth, and Timo de Tosto in the top 10. Taking a look at the session at hand here on the Nordschleife, we find ourselves actually halfway through a free practice session as things have been bumped back by 10 minutes to introduce an extended qualifying tenure. Now 15 minutes given over to both categories, GT3 and GT4 respectively, for an overall quality time of 30 minutes. Two mandatory pit stops for both fuel and tyres coming up in the 90 minutes of racing, the last endurance race of the season then here in Season 3. The next race coming up back onto the traditional format. We've been following on board throughout this broadcast so far with that of Giacomo Marianelli. And taking a look onto the timing charts as we find it right now, before we get into the topic of balance of performance across both categories, we find Mr. Scallops, currently the championship leader and looking to be consecutive champion here in Season 3, currently fastest by 1.7 seconds. Pascal Stoltz, it's worth noting, we saw him in the Carousel Cup not long ago in the very same Jaguar. So it is quite the curious case here to see him back on the Nordschleife in the 172 after a long hiatus in this series. De Munster currently the fastest of the GT4s and only the third fastest time overall, as drivers still struggle to put times in during free practice. We see last round's race winner for GT3, that's Marcelin Broschtuli in the number 293, currently making his way down around by looks of it here on the run in towards that. If we get a rough look of things here, that's down towards, I believe that's Steilstrecke that he's head towards there. Yes, Steilstrecke, and then the Caracciola Carousel down here in Lord only knows which sector now. There's so many to count on this circuit. We see though for Broschtuli making his way down towards Carousel. And through he goes, and the number 293 washed out there almost immediately. That's going to be a major haggling point for drivers over the course of qualifying coming up just around the corner. It may very well be the case with only 5 minutes left in the session that we may have to wait just a little while longer before we can get a tour of the track. We'll stay on board with Brustuli with the timing charts up on our left-hand side to quickly discuss balance of performance before we head into this qualifying session at hand, an extended qualifier given the nature of the venue we're at today. Looking at GT3's balance of performance, let's take a look here. We find that Ferrari 40 kilos off of the 488. That's fantastic news then for Anthony Valorio, the sole user of the 488 in this championship, with Porsche losing 23 kilos. So this will be fantastic news for Marco Brustuli as well as Luca Tamburini. We also see there with Czar just joining us now in the 92. We saw him last round in Snetterton, I believe. And they'll all be benefiting from 23 kilos off. The Lexus RCF set to lose 18 kilos in this round, though as it appears a pity there that there may not actually be any Lexuses on today's grid. McLaren find themselves also without a car on the grid, but as we see there into the positives, 1 kilo onto the 720S, Lamborghini with 5, Ferrari with 6, Ford with 7, BMW and Aston Martin both with 15 kilos to play with. In terms of Nissan, again, sadly, no data to hand at this time, but we'll try and get an update on that as and when we can. Looking into the GT4s, we find here Ginetta with extreme changes on the way. So for Tom Wells, the sole user of the G55 in this championship, he will be beaming to see 40 kilos taken off of the G55 heading into today's race. Aston Martin lose 20 kilos off of their car down in GT4. There appears that both Asahi Ota and Pierre Maxulim, two of the primary users for the Aston, don't appear to be on today's grid, with hopes that we could potentially see them later on. Audi losing 17 kilos, Alpine losing 10, Porsche losing 8, Chevrolet losing 4, Mercedes losing 2, McLaren gaining 22. So horrific news then for Timo de Tosto, as he's really lucked out. The only manufacturer on the entered list of manufacturers for this season to be gaining weight here in round 7. With 3 minutes left to go in the session, sadly no qualifying predictions to go off of coming up into 30 minutes of qualifying just around the corner. You take a look with some of the drivers out on track. We see here with Giacomo Marianelli, he's down the Dottinger Hoa at this time, heading in towards the run of things down through Antonio Spocher and Tiergarten. And just before we do get into the full track tour, I would like to make a little bit of a disclaimer. The German you're about to hear was not performed by a professional. And I do apologise if we mess up any names there, but simple account of the fact that we just don't know any German here on TRTN, but we'll find out. We'll find out. I've been told it's passable. I've been told it's possible, and we'll take those accolades where we can find them. Second fastest for Giacomo Marianelli, up and ahead of Pascal Stoltz by about, looking at it there, 0.4 of a second, 440 thousandths precisely between the pair, and 1.345 away from the leading car, the number 394 Nissan of Mr. Scallops. Once again, gunning for victories. Now, it's worth pointing out the last 2 races failed to provide the Nissan with yet another win on his itinerary for this season, as it was Stephen Sutton to win in Bathurst and it was Marco Brustuli to win in Snetterton. Certainly has provided a rather unique set of circumstances here for the returning champion to try and hunt down yet another. He does find himself a lot closer than I think he'd imagined he'd be in the penultimate round of the championship. Both championships still set to be wrapped up next week, with any hopes at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. It's definitely worth pointing out as well in the GT3 conversation. Of course, straight line speed is a huge talking point for us here on TRTN. Do keep a very close eye to that Nissan, but also it's worth pointing out, keep an eye on both of the Fords. Neither of them out on track at the moment. That's for Dion Helgelian and Stephen Sutton. These two gave us some fantastic fighting a few weeks ago in Bathurst. Truly, truly spectacular stuff. But keep an eye on them down that down through the run of the Dottinger Hoa. It's also worth pointing out in the opening part of the Nordschleife, out past the Kittelbacher Hoa, Flugplatz, Kottenborn, Schwedenkreuz section, they are going to be much, much faster than the contemporaries around them in GT3. For the GT4s, it's a close eye for McLaren, I would say. Timo de Tosto has got, by and large, the fastest GT4 of the current selection of only 4 vehicles signed up for this race in the GT4 category. Among them, Matthias de Munster, Tom Wells, Marco Gaioliolo, and Timo de Tosto himself. So quite an ensemble for such a small amount of the GT4s, but of course these delays that have come up in the last week have caused somewhat of a bit of havoc in the GT4 field. It's what's thinned their numbers out to such a drastic extent. Well, coming up to the end of free practice, as to remind you, just before we get in towards qualifying, we are under special circumstances for round 7, an extended 30-minute qualifying, so 15 minutes for GT3 and 15 minutes for GT4. Functionally, they're in the conversation of about 2 laps. So this is going to be a bit of a tough one, I'll be completely honest. There will be a significant bleed over period where on that second flying lap for the GT3s, the GT4s will be out on track in the Grand Prix section. So it's going to be curious to see how all of that plays out. We'll be catching on board with the GT3s as we make our way into qualifying. We'll try to catch on board for a full tour of this track because fortunately for the drivers, they don't have to do a full tour of the Nordschleife for their outlap. They only have to do the Grand Prix circuit, and it's already a reduced version of the Grand Prix circuit as is, as we'll come to explain in a moment's time. We actually do end up using the Yokohama S's that we spoke about in some of our brief visits to the GP circuit. Already we've got some complaints though in from Tom Wells regarding his Ginetta. The minus 40 kilo is great and all, but what he's been telling us here, it needs a lot more than minus 40 to be competitive in today's race, because taking a quick glance at it, it's 20 miles an hour down over its contemporaries on the straightaways. So for a track with 170 corners, Wells won't be in any shortage of finding areas to attack, but it's going to be on those straightaways, the gaps in between those major attacking spots where he's going to be at his most vulnerable. That Ginetta, a super short ratio gearbox by comparison to the rest of the field, and that is going to come back to bite him on a track of this magnitude. So then waiting for the start of this qualifying session, we see out on track at the moment is Timo de Tosto, just having made his way out towards, by the looks of it here, taking the run up through towards Rohr 8, just out past the exit of the carousel section, in towards Hedvigsholm. We do see joining the session, that's Alessandro Litti, if I'm not mistaken, and a driver we're used to seeing compete with Lamborghini in a few different championships. We do find him this time around competing with Porsche, the 718 Cayman. So as mentioned, sadly, without anything to speak of in regards to qualifying predictions, but obviously high hopes still reside in the court of Mr. Scallops. But I would say with recent competition from Marcelin Brustulli, as well as beneficial balance of performance for Anthony Valorio, this could be a close pinch towards the end of qualifying later on down the road. Bear in mind, they have less time than they've had here in free practice. Now, not necessarily a clean 50-50 split where they've had only 10 minutes in qualifying time overall to play with against the 20 minutes of free practice. This is a little bit less than that. They've got about 3/4 of the time available, 15 minutes over the 20 they've had thus far. But unlike the 20 they've spent thus far, they're not sharing that with the GT4s on the same stretch of the track. They'll be in their own 15 minutes. The GT4s will be in their own. They will be split down the middle of this session. So then, on towards said session, as we see here, 30 minutes of qualifying underway. We can see up the road already, making his way out onto the track. We saw right in the corner of our eye, going to catch on board here with Mr. Scallops. Bear in mind the standings by which he needs to improve in this championship. Taking a look here in the championship standings, that of Dion Helgelien. That gap is currently 14 points. Now, in order for him to rule things out of being numerically caught by the end of this round of the championship, he is going to need to find a way to bring that 14-point tally up to a current of 32 points. So he's going to need to find 18 points over Helgelien. Feasibly, that would only come in the package of him winning the race and Helgelien DNFing. So Helgelien, I imagine, is definitely aware of this, and even if he's not feeling the most confident, which we don't yet know, but say, for example, if he isn't feeling confident, then prioritizing survival is what's going to keep him in the fight heading in towards the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, because, yes, while that might be a significantly smaller circuit than what we see here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, I don't think many tracks are going to be able to compare in size. This is about, doing the rough maths of it, it was about 4 times the size of the Circuit de la Sarthe, and it is a remarkably big circuit, the largest still functional racing circuit known to man. Of course, hosted Formula 1 races up until the mid-1970s. And obviously the events that transpired at the 1976 German Grand Prix not only set in motion life-changing events for Niki Lauda, but it also changed the fate of that 1976 championship and for the Nürburgring itself, because that would be the last time it would feature on the F1 calendar as the Nordschleife, and the next time would be on the GP section introduced in the mid-80s. So we're on board with Mr. Scallops starting off his first flying lap, and this will give us the opportunity to tour around this circuit. You can see here the change to Sector 1. We're not using the Mercedes Arena, we're using the Yokohama S's on our way out through turns 1 and 2. And from there on after, it does remain relatively the same to what we've seen in the Nürburgring GP circuit before. So out through the Ford curve we go, down towards Dunlop. Very quickly will it become the case where corner numbers become an outmoded concept. In towards Dunlop we go. Up through the Schumacher S's. Now heading down into an area that we've sometimes referred to as Bit and Warsteiner, sometimes also called Kumo and Bit Corner. And these give us the run down towards the Hatzenbecksbogen. Normally the precursor to the last couple of corners before the end of a lap. This one is only just the beginning, so out through the Hatzenbecksbogen in towards the Vidal chicane. Now, so begins the run into the Green Hell, and I suppose it's going to be rather interesting to see from the point of view of Mr. Scalps as we head in towards the Nordschleife then, very quickly hooking off from where Coca-Cola curve would have been over on the right. We hook in now towards the Hatzenberg section. This winding, incredibly claustrophobic opening sector is one that most of these drivers will have completely nailed down to muscle memory. You'll note the distinct lack of real braking markers for any of these corners. This is purely one that drivers will end up gunning by eye, the most astute drivers gunning it off of instinct. It'll be almost subconscious for these drivers to process this opening section. So out through the Kittelbacher Hohe in towards Flugplatz. Dangerous spot for the Nissan. Down through Flugplatz. In this area, he'll be able to keep the foot rather confidently in the floor all the way down through Cottonborn in towards Schwedenkreuz. Heading to... Looking here, Arenberg, then Poststrasse. See just a tiny bit of slip angle there off of the Nissan. That just goes to show how hard he's throwing the car through these corners. Mr. Scallops leaving nothing up to chance then. Down through the run of the Fuchsrohr. In towards Adenauer Forst. Now, this is a very popular section of the track coming up here. If you've been on YouTube at any point to watch Nürburgring, say for perhaps a Nürburgring fails compilation, you'll no doubt remember this section, the Adenauer Forst. Very easy for drivers to run off into that grassy section there just in front of them. Even easier still to spin the car out on those monstrously high curbs on the exit of Adenauer Forst. In towards Metzgerfeld, coming into the forest section, as I sometimes call it. Down towards Kahlenhardt. Oh, big trouble there. Up off four wheels for Mr. Scallops. It's a disastrous start to his qualifying endeavours. That does bring about a bit of an early end for him here in this first part of qualifying. He's back into the pit lane. Now trying to catch on with the nearest driver down the road. I believe here would be taking a look on board with the 293. So we're on board with Markelin Busch-Thule, who now takes up the helm of giving us the unofficial tour of things round the Nürburgring. It's now heading in towards the Ausfahrt-Breitscheid. Sadly, we missed out on the Exmüller and Verseifen section just a moment ago. Now catching on board with Busch-Thule. We trade one six-cylinder for another, the V6 from the Nissan for the flat six of the Porsche. Very familiar soundtrack here in the Nürburgring. Heading out through Bergwerk. Much like the area that comprises the run from the Kittelbacher Hohe to Schwedenkreuz and Arenberg, this is another area where drivers can rather confidently stay buried in the throttle here, all the way down to, at the very least, the run in towards Mudkurve, where some drivers lift, some drivers may even find the courage to stay firmly on the throttle. We'll see whether or not that's the case. A little bit of a lift here. I think it would be for some a suicide mission to attempt. Down through Mudkurve, in towards Klostertal. Then to Steilstrecke. Now, of course, we saw Brustoli during free practice in this area of the track, with the drivers only really having about 7 minutes of available qualifying time left to go. In towards Carousel, sometimes also called the Caracciola Carousel. Heading in towards Hohe Acht. Down towards their Hedwigshöhe. Just grazing either side of the track. They're using every available inch to his disposal, but he can't get cocky with the curbs here. On the run down through Wippermann in towards Eschbach. So through Wippermann into Eschbach now. On the run towards Pünchen. And another popular area of the Nürburgring that you'll have no doubt seen on YouTube is here, the run through Eschbach. They'll film up there by those tents and the portaloos, and they'll be able to film the run up and around this corner here at Eiskurve. On the exit then of Brunchen into Eiskurve, to begin the run out towards Flansgarten 1, otherwise Flansgarten 1, into the Sprunghügel, an area where the cars will actually get up off all 4 wheels when pushed hard enough for it, into Flansgarten 2. This area of the track, I mean, it's hypnotic to watch from these cars. They are absolutely flat in, but it's almost as if you were to take Rally Finland and pave it over. It's this undulating design. It's just absolute bliss to watch, and I imagine for the drivers, absolute bliss to navigate as well. In through the Schwalbenschwanz, in towards the Kleines Karussell. Hooks in there on the left. A little bit of a washout there, a little bit of grass as well for Markelin Brustoli, but really in a case where we have so little time to play with in terms of the qualifying, it has got to be a case here where you can afford a few mistakes, just don't get into the wall. Out on the run through Galgenkopf into the Dottinger Hohe. Now, this is the area of the track where most drivers have their concerns. Among them, of course, we saw from Tom Wells, 20 miles an hour down over the average. We'll see here for Porsche, they are somewhat of a jack of all trades when it comes to straight line speed. And of course, on a track with so many corners, not often is the case where drivers can prioritize developing the car for straight line speed. Otherwise, they find themselves with a woefully unstable package of a car for the rest of the race. We'll see the strongest points come out from that of Ford, that of, for that matter, Nissan as well. Porsche will find themselves falling in behind, but it's in the corners where they have so much of an advantage. Out on the run then through Tiergarten, back on to the start-finish straight. So for Markelin Brustoli, it appears to be de facto time here for the GT3 benchmark. Across the line goes Brustoli, an 8 minutes 15.680. Now nearest to the line, the 41 of Anthony Valorio with Ferrari. See on the run down through to the start-finish line here, just on the exit of Tiergarten. Then following in his trials, we'll catch on with the 45. That'll be Dion Helgelien. And then the 888 coming to the line thereafter. That'll be Antonio Cardoso. So Valorio to the line, 6.7 seconds off there. Helgelien to the line thereafter. And for Helgelien, slots up to second. Then we see the 888. Antonio Cardoso, driver we've seen before. Let's see what he does on this lap. 4th fastest. Nearest to the line, Giacomo Marianelli. Currently on his way in towards, currently the scope of having a little gander here. That's the Kleines Karussell. Much like Markelin Brustoli was caught out just a little bit there. Just a little bit. Oh, that's a lot more than a little bit through Galgenkopf. That means functionally for him, he's going to have one more flying lap. He's still got the time before the end, technically, as one could suggest, of this GT3 section of qualifying. He will be far and away out of sight, out of mind of the GT4s over the course of this flying lap when they get to come out on track in about 3.5 minutes time. This is a somewhat of doomsday scenario here for Mr. Scallops, because he does find himself without a line here. This is his one and only chance to recover from the incident that he suffered down in the forest section just out past the run of Callenhard. You can see, though, in his second attempt, he's made much better work of it, but he's only going to really have one shot here. We must not miss his chance. Currently out on track then, making his way through that of Flansgarten's fire. We see here with Czar in the number 92, relatively new entry to the championship. I mean, Czar in the number 92. In fact, no, hang on. I don't think he's that new. I do distinctly recall, looking back on the calendar, I think he may have been in here since Watkins Glen. I'm still not 100% on that one. I'm going to have to go and double check that. We'll stay on board with him. He's nearest to the line as it stands right now. No, it must have had him mixed up with someone else. He made his debut in round 5, actually, Bathurst. Must have had him mixed up with some other one. Behind him, the 172, Pascal Stoltz, a driver with great experience on car and track combinations like this, as we saw him last time here on HCCL in the Carousel Cup, competing in the 172 in the GT3 category. So we'll go and catch with Amin Zar. With Porsche. Across the line then, 5th fastest for Amin Zar. The number 813 coming up thereafter. We're going to see the 172 to the line, Pascal Stoltz. 3rd fastest for Jaguar. And the 813, Luca Tamburini, making his way to the line. He's down through Antonio Spucher into Tiergarten on his run in towards the start-finish straight. Porsche currently leading in this session. A bit of a wobble there for Tamburini, but down towards the line to put a time on the charts. Where will he find himself? Can he find himself up in that top 5 ahead of Cardoso? Across the line he goes. Yes, exactly 5th place for Luca Tamburini. 11.7 seconds off the fastest time, but up the road by 3 seconds over Cardoso and up by 5 over Amin Zar. 394 then, nearest to the line. We've got 50 seconds before those GT4s get to come out and play. It's worth pointing out, and just as a moment of curiosity, Alessandro Litti, he does know that he's not driving a GT3 anymore. He is, yeah, that's a very odd-looking Lamborghini, if I don't say so myself, but I don't think he's aware of that, or if he is, then certainly been made aware of it. On the run through the Schwalbenstrand into the Kleiner Carousel. The Ben H44 in chat. Yeah, we do have a very busy day today. We've just come off the back of a first of 3 races today. So we did the second round of the AXRL Southern Summer Endurance Series. That was over in Zandvoort. That was a 3-hour race there. We've got a 90-minute race coming up around the corner here as we start the run of GT4's qualifying. We do see released now is Matthias de Munster, right behind him Tom Wells, and also making their way out onto the track, Marco Gaioliolo and Timo De Tosto. We'll wait to see, though, the end of this flying lap from Mr. Scallops. There are a few other GT3s out on track that we're still waiting to see from. Among them we see is the 293 on his second flying lap. So Michael Imbrostoli was able to find enough time to go in for another one. We also see Giacomo Marianelli and Anthony Valorio out on track. Excuse me. We also see as well the number 7 out on track. So a few more GT3s still expected to the line, but the bulk of it is that the GT4 qualifying has officially begun. The GT3s are on their terminal lap. They come in, and that will be the end of it. So Mr. Scallops to the line. Can he do it in one? Across the line, he goes second fastest. So starts upon that front row as it stands up and ahead of Dion Helgeli and his championship rival here. Those two divided by 14 points, but it is worth pointing out the 45 is still out on track. The gap between them, when you consider 170 turns, okay, 170 turns, and if we want to get technical as well, that comprises either 25.4 kilometers if you're using the metric, or 15.7 if you're using imperial miles of FIA grade 3. When you consider a track of this size, a gap of about 1.1 seconds is really not a big deal. 1.110 actually, so even easier to calculate. Helge could absolutely fly in 1.110 seconds over the course of a lap this long. Really, every ounce counts when it comes to these flying laps here at the Nürburgring. Nearest to the line is Marc-Helene Broschtoli. Is on his way down towards, that's the Sprunghügel section, so he's just on the exit of Flansgarten 1. Now into Flansgarten 2. You can see just the body language on the 293. It's buckling just ever so slightly under the pressure. Very vivid performance we're seeing thus far from the 293. And then, of course, after today's race here in the Nürburgring, we've also got the 4 hours of Suzuka at 6 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time over on the NLRL Console Endurance Series. Also a penultimate round like today's. Then tomorrow we get back underway with the NLRL Sunday League. You see then, just briefly in here, and we will be catching on board with those GT4s in a moment's time. They're currently out on the basis of their flying laps. We are just quickly seeing here with the trailing end of GT3s qualifying on with Marc-Helene Broschtoli. One last week, or I suppose I keep saying that almost instinctively. It wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago, due to the delays last week that kept us from being able to go live last week. You see, though, for Broschtoli, 8:15.680 to beat as he makes his way to the end of qualifying. What is it going to look like here for the number 293? Across the line he goes, 8:15.680 to beat, 8:13.335, the new fastest time then by Marc-Helene Broschtoli. Fantastic stuff then from Porsche, leading this session by a country mile. Looking to the line here, we see as well coming in the number 41, Anthony Valorio for Ferrari. Let's see, can there be an improvement found for this one? 41 from 5th on the field. Needs about 2 seconds, just a little over 2 seconds for 4th. To the line he goes. And up to 4th he goes. Extends the time up over Pascal Stoltz by a factor of 1.8 seconds. Just a little shy, actually, of 1.8 seconds. Valorio to 4th. Starts with that second row alongside Dion Helge. Number 51, nearest to the line. That's Giacomo Marianelli on his way through the Schwalbenschwanz, and we'll catch on with him in a moment's time. But let's go to quickly take a look in here. The driver leading this qualifying session charge, and that's Matthias de Munster. Now, when we consider how things currently stand because of those delays, sadly that has knocked the schedule of Vladislav Mizin out of whack, and it means that he's not going to be able to compete in these rounds and defend for the championship he has stood in very solid ground to claim. And thinking on this situation when we first caught wind of it, it is somewhat of a bittersweet ending when you consider that Matthias de Munster, yes, he will be able to stand on the way things are looking at the moment on a championship title by the time we get to the end of racing next week at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. But the thought of what could have been, I think it does take, I imagine, at least some of the gratification out of it for the number 69. He would have liked, in an ideal world, to fight with the number 2 all the way to the very end. These two having shared in some fantastic performances over the course of the season. And with that points gap currently tied up at around 7 points between de Munster and Mizin, it means that he will overtake in the championship. Not by enough as it stands to wrap up the championship here. He will be going into that last round still with the title to defend. Meanwhile, Marianelli 6th at the end of the GT3's qualifying. Also, we do just briefly catch here Stephen Sutton on his way down toward the line. Whereabouts does Stephen Sutton place? Of course, 1 in Bathurst. Across the line, 7th, up and ahead of Luca Tamburini, bringing us to the end of the GT3s definitively in terms of their qualifying. Let's go to catch on board then with the AMG of that of Matthias de Munster. Looking to go and catch on with them here. Scrolling through, we see the number 69. I suppose the circumstances at play, though, shouldn't diminish from what he's been able to accomplish over the course of this season. He has been, realistically, that second in command for the season's championship for GT4. So with all power to him, this could be the home stretch charge he's been searching for all this time. Matthias de Munster looks to be on track then to take over the championship lead by the time we get to Spa. Could very well take the championship for his own at the end of next week's race. It is worth pointing out, though, when talking about gaps, only 16 points away from him is the driver currently backed up 3 seconds behind him on this track, Tom Wells with Ginetta. And on a track like this that takes absolutely no prisoners, it's not out of the realm of possibility to suggest that if Matthias de Munster somehow DNFs in this race and Wells does not, and goes on to not only secure his first ever GT4 win in this season, but he could very well find himself on the grounds to overtake the lead of the championship from both Mercedes cars playing defensively into Spa. Plenty of opportunities to consider, and it is quite a rare coincidence then that we head into the penultimate round of a championship with 2 championships still left to decide. It is a rare and unique pleasure. We'll stay on board with De Munster. We'll be back to you in just a moment's time. So now on the run through Brunchen. You see there, that was full airtime. You heard it in the engine note. The whole thing under the brakes, the wheels completely locked in, stalled the engine revs out. Out through Flansgarten 2. And we'll just quickly cut away from De Munster just to give you the perspective here. And this was one of the main complaints issued by Tom Wells about his car. Bear in mind, with 40 kilos shed away from that Ginetta, this is the most competitive package it's received this season under balance of performance. But you're going to start to see exactly why that's not what he needs at this time. What he needs is 2 extra cylinders, because making his way out through Galgenkopf, we'll come to see here, look at the gap there to your bottom left-hand side. 2 seconds, now 2.1, and watch it climb from this point onwards. 2.2, you start to see it filter in there. 2.2, 2.3, now you're going to start to see it ramp up. 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, 2.9, 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and it just continues to climb here. This is the major complaint for Ginetta. They're 20 miles an hour slower on the Dottinger, and it's so much so to a point where 2 seconds doubles. If you have a gap of 2 seconds, we're actually a little over that. We are nearly at 1.5 times the amount, as it's nearly 5 seconds between Wells and De Munster alone. So taking a look down towards the line, Matthias De Munster, the provisional time to start off the GT4 qualifiers. Down to the line goes the 69, 46 seconds off the beat, but the fastest for GT4. Across the line comes Tom Wells. And he's 3 seconds off piste there, 3.5 nearly. Nearest to the line here, Marco Gagliolo for Alpine. I imagine, will there be the same amount of troubles for Alpine that there have been for Ginetta? Seems that there have been troubles elsewhere. Coming to the line, Timo de Tosto. Down to the line goes the McLaren. Now, of course, this is one to keep an eye out for. If he can start on GT4's front row, he's got a very good chance of things here. He starts in behind Wells. 53 seconds exactly off of the fastest lap. Of course, that was set up in GT3, so it's not really an accurate frame of comparison. So taking a look here more realistically to give us the scope of things, 8:59, 4:15, 9:02, 8:35, 9:06, 3:35, and 9:08, 3:20. 3 minutes left to go then in this session. We still wait to see the time of one more driver here, that being Alessandro Litti in the number 123. You see, though, for the rest of the GT4s, they have gone on to continue lapping here at the Nürburgring, so they're going to go in for one more flying lap, so it stands. So we have currently out on track Matthias de Munster, we also have Tom Wells, and then also the number 30 as it stands there of Marco Gaioliolo. 58, out onto another flying lap then. 1, 2, 3 still out on track as it stands. And it shows there that Helgilian is out of the pit box, but that is definitely not the case. You can see that he is in the pit lane as it stands. So we head into the final minutes of this qualifying session. For the majority of these drivers, they are now on their final available lap. So one slip up and that's it for them. For Matthias de Munster, he holds on to a class pole position for the GT4s. Alongside him on that front row for division will be Tom Wells. They comprise the 6th row overall of this grid, but the first row among the GT4s. Behind them is Timo de Tosto, currently division 3rd. Michael Gaioliolo, division 4th in that Alpine. We can see him screaming up and around that of... looking at it there, that was Flugplatz. It's something to point out as well. We've seen the Alpine from some other drivers in this championship off in other GT4 championships. I think we saw one quite recently over in Brands Hatch, the opening round for Season 3 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup. We saw that Anthony Valorio actually got behind the wheel of the A110. He said it was an absolute riot to drive. So it's quite a promising sign here. We could be seeing maybe, and I'd hope for such, in the next couple of months, perhaps in the same way we've been saying, seeing a bit of a renaissance in Nissan and Bentley's popularity in GT3. Could there be the same story argued for that of Alpine in GT4? We've seen that Chevrolet is currently the manufacturer to be on most stages of GT4. Mercedes are very close heel, and in this championship they've been the dominant factor throughout. I mean, taking a look back through some of those results as well reveals pretty obvious information for us here. Not a single manufacturer has come through and done what Mercedes has been able to do in GT4. That is a 100% win rate as a manufacturer. Not a single other has had the chance so far. I mean, you could make the argument there was possibly going to be an opportunity for Tom Wells. He had a great fight with Vladislav Mizin in La Castellet. That is by and large one of the best rounds of the championship, if I do say so myself. So it's worth pointing out that while yes, he isn't particularly happy with some of the certain aspects of his car, namely that top speed, he is still within pace here. I mean, taking a look at the gap, it is just under 3.5 seconds, which on the Nürburgring you can see is what currently divides the GT3s. That's pretty average, so nothing to scoff at, and Wells could have an early charge here on de Munster. Bear in mind, 90 minutes and 2 pit stops of racing to be had here in round 7. They're currently still out on track. De Munster, Wells and Gaioliolo. The remaining drivers then of this qualifying session. GT3 having wrapped up as well. Marcolin Brostuli on pole position. Scallop second. Helgelien third. We'll go through the full grid when we get the form up in just a while from now. Tom Wells has called it quits down his qualifying endeavours. Satisfied with the front row start in Ginetta for the GT4s. They'll start on the 6th row overall of this grid behind the back of the GT3s. It's looking to be a very strong starting position in category for the number 12. Bear in mind, both he and De Munster are the likely heirs to the throne here in the absence of Vladislav Mizin, forced to have pulled away from the championship due to the technical delays incurred last week. He's not able to, by our current understanding of the situation, to make it to the rest of the championship. Marco Gagliolo, he's just shy of 2 seconds off of starting upon the podium. Currently on that 2nd row for the GT4s, 4th place in division, 14th outright, and tucked in behind the McLaren of Timo de Tosto. 2.5 seconds up Bindia on the curb, says Tom Wells. So looking under... Oh, hang on a sec. We just cut away there as the Alpine got up on 2 wheels. But having a look at that gap, obviously it is 3.5 seconds. It was 2.5 at the time it happened, and I'm pretty certain it was just before, I want to say, Klostertal. So he still had plenty of track left to go. If he was able to form up even an extra second on that, he could have challenged the division pole position. Reluctantly, then he'll start on that front row, but still in a powerful position from division 2nd. You see there, the 30 going slow. So I believe that's Marco Gagliolo waving the white flag there on his endeavours for qualifying up through Sprunghurgel. So that leaves Matthias de Munster without any remaining challenges to his division pole, making his way out through Galgenkopf then onto the Dottinger. You can actually see here, just bringing telemetry back in, 1.8 seconds worth of an improvement found over the course of this lap for Matthias de Munster. So it will be an extension into the 158s. In fact, even with the exit there of Tiergarten, he could even find his way to the not 158, so the 858. I was about to say 158, that is quite fast. No, 857s by the looks of it there. Across the line he goes. We'll take a look at those times in just a second here, but it's Matthias de Munster for division pole for GT4, outright pole and division pole for GT3, Marcolin Brostuli. So let's get a look at that there. Yes, he did break into the 857s. 857, 489. See more people joining us in chat. If you're joining us just now, you've come to the end of this extended qualifying session here in round 7, the penultimate round of season 3 of the HCCL Multiclass Championship. Taking a look then after this session, we are now into 90 minutes of racing coming up just around the corner. 2 mandatory pit stops for both fuel and tyres here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Marcolin Brostuli on pole for GT3, Matthias de Munster on pole for GT4. Currently 5 GT4s to 10 GT3s. So then we'll get a full look at the grid. Currently no articles of news to discuss that haven't already been brought up. I think one of the major articles we discussed earlier on in our broadcast with AXRL, we'll bring it back up for the sake of brevity here, and it was that George Russell was on pole position for the Australian Grand Prix, leading a Mercedes 1-2 in qualifying, with teammate Andrea Kimi Antonelli starting second. We wait for the grid to form up. Your two pole sitters then. Perhaps a coincidence they're running the same colours. You can see there, red, white, and little splashes of neon greenish yellow. Taking a look then at that grid, we get a short run. We're not going to be doing the full run around the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Do not worry. We're going to have the shorter run just on the exit here of the Dottinger Hohe. We're going to head down through that of... Oh, hang on a sec. Oh, hang on just a moment. Yes, we have got a disconnect. The 41 has just disconnected. He's going to rejoin, but he's going to have to start from the back of the grid. That's Anthony Valorio as it stands there. So getting a scope of the grid. Marc-Éliane Broschtuli on pole position. Mr. Scallop starts on the front row alongside him. Dion Helge-Leon, his championship rival for season 3, starts in 3rd place. Pascal Stolz now promoted to 4th, but starts in tucked behind Helge-Leon. Giacomo Marianelli starts 5th with open road in front of him because of the gap created from the 41 that has just disconnected. Will, if he does reconnect, start in 15th place. Stephen Sutton in 6th with Luca Tamburini in 7th. Antonio Cardoso in 8th and Amin Zar in 9th. Looking onto the GT4s, we see Matthias de Munster on division pole. Right alongside him then is Tom Wells. Both of these two set to become the heirs to the lead of this championship after today's round. Timo de Tosto starts on division 3rd on that second row for class. And up and alongside Marco Gagliolo in the number 30 Alpine. Alessandro Litti starts in division 5th. We see now tucked in behind all of them, Anthony Valorio on very, very precarious circumstances. So catching on board with Marc-Éliane Broschtuli to take us away onto the run of this formation run. I wouldn't say necessarily a formation lap ahead of us as we make our way down through Antoniusbuche into Tiergarten, then to kick off the race here at the mighty Nürburgring Nordschleife. So we'll see him pull away in just a moment's time. You can see just made out there past the rear wing on the 293. The rest of the field, you see the adjustments to the grid order made there. It's going to be a very bizarre start on that 3rd row because clear line of sight ahead for Pascal Stolz. Meanwhile, Giacomo Marianelli is going to be starting right behind that of Dion Helge-Leon. So they're making their way down towards the line here, facing down the start-finish straight. A staggering amount of track remains before them here for the penultimate round of the championship. 90 minutes by which to tackle it all. Making their way down towards the line then. 15 cars in all. From the front of the field then, Marc-Éliane Broschtuli, last round's race winner. Can he do it 2 times on the trot in the very trailing end of the championship? Let's find out. We're green and racing here in the Nürburgring as things kick off to a bang. It's Nissan versus Porsche. Meanwhile, in the background, we can see already things livening up on the grid there behind. Pascal Stolz up to 3rd, late onto the brakes, possibly into 2nd as we make our way around the Yokohama S's, tucks back in, slots alongside that of Giacomo Marianelli, but makes contact with the wall, forcing him down to 4th. Meanwhile, behind them, we can see Luca Tamburini going side by side with what looks to be there. That's Dion Helge-Leon, had a less than ideal start. Behind him, we have Amin Zar now up and ahead of Antonio Cardoso. Meanwhile, taking a look here, Tom Wells gets the charge up over Matthias de Munster for the GT4s. The Ginetta leads in category, as you see getting up alongside him there. Anthony Valorio from the back of the field now reunites with the rest of GT3 just before the run of the Dunlop curve. We see there trouble for Antonio Cardoso, as we just saw rejoining the track alongside that of Tom Wells as we get up towards the Schumacher S, as he actually has to slot in behind that of Matthias de Munster. Watching here with Wells, you see there the two Mercedes cars, one in GT3, one in GT4, and there's a stark difference in performance to be had between the number 69 in the GT4 and the number 888, now tucked in right onto the rear bumper of Tom Wells' Ginetta. Looking up the line here, this is a rather curious state of affairs. The front of the field then, Michael Imbroscioli breaks away from Mr. Scallops. Giacomo Marianelli up to third. Pascal Stoltz fourth behind them. Dion Helgelien in fifth. Looking down the line, we do see the two Porsches of Amin Zar and Luca Tamburini go side by side on the run through the Vidal chicane. That's a bit of a risky one. Now on the run out through into the Nordschleife itself. We've got the finger on the trigger here for the yellow flag button because we know what is going to happen at some point over the course of this race. We see this is the forefront of the GT4 field. It's Tom Wells from Matthias de Munster, Timo de Tosto and Marco Gaioliolo. Alessandro Litti in Division 5th. Watching in here with Dion Helgelien. Tucked in behind Pascal Stoltz. You can see the line of sight up towards the front of the field. That sort of deep, almost crimson, almost burgundy-like red of the back end of Michael Imbroscioli's Porsche, making its way up through that of Flugplatz. Right over the nose, though, of Dion Helgelien's Mustang is the Jaguar of Pascal Stoltz. V8 against V8, 5.4 against 5.0. You see not far behind at all is another Ford Mustang. We see Stephen Sutton, the number 7, one in Bathurst in a fight against Dion Helgelien. Helgelien looking to emerge from the Nissan of Mr. Scallops' shadow in this championship. Those two still incredibly close together in the championship standings. Meanwhile, getting a look in with the other Porsches in the GT3 field, we also see from the point of view of Anthony Valorio down through Fuchsroy into the Adnauer Fast section, right up to the back end of the 813 of Luca Tamburini. Up in front as well, Amin Zar in the number 92. Up towards Adnauer we go, very late onto the brakes there for the number 41. Whole difference of lines there. I think just playing things a little bit more hesitantly for Valorio. We also see joining the session, I mean, better late than never, I suppose, but that's Przemak Zulim with Aston Martin. Is he actually going to get out on track there? I mean, I'd be quite surprised to see were that such a case. Let's get a look on board, though. This is the division first fight between Matthias de Munster and that of Tom Wells. Well, technically, yes, if you want to be pedantic about it, this is the fight for 11th, but for a division first among the GT4s, as they're very unlikely to be holding a candle to their larger GT3 counterparts. And we'll catch on with these two in due course. Taking a look up here, this is the fight for first place outright, so this is a lot more literal when we say it in the fight between Broscioli and Scallops. The two leading fights then, back to back on our displays. What a treat. Can't ask for luck better than that. And for Scallops, he's going to be gearing himself up. If he can't take Broscioli before he gets to the Dottinger, he will be able to take him when he's on the Dottinger. So it's a catch-22 for the Porsche. For Mr. Scallops, he seems very well attuned to that Nissan in this race. He's not super frightened after the incident he had earlier on in the session today in qualifying, where he's already learned his mistakes out through the forest section down at Kallenhard and is not going to be playing things too dangerously through there, especially knowing that the cars around him don't stand much a greater chance compared to him. So he can afford to make these more hesitant calls, knowing everyone else is going to be doing the same. And he's not going to lose that competitive advantage for it. Meanwhile, the 1-2-3, Alessandro Litti a little bit in trouble there on the exit of Arnberg and Polstrasse. Quickly checking in with the GT4 fight. We've seen that it has since changed hands. Matthias de Munster up into the lead of GT4s. Rather unsurprisingly, when you consider the stark difference in straight line speed exhibited between Ginetta and Mercedes AMG down towards Stahlstrecke. There you go. Worth pointing out as well, Timo de Tosto really not too far away at all. And the same story there and applies for Marco Gagliolo. Those two looking to do battle. And dare I say it, yes, that is Przemek Zulim. He is out on track. He's 280 seconds away from the nearest car, but he is out on track. You got to hand it to him there. He joined into the session late where most drivers would have just called it a day and not competed. He's not the kind of driver to make those calls so early. You see here, this is Anthony Valorio's point of view, fighting with Amin Zar. Luca Tamburini just escaping sight up through the road there on the exit of Brunchen into Ice-Curver. Amin Zar gets a little bit wide there. That could invite in an advance by the 41 as he tucks in to the right-hand side of the track. Into Flansgart 9s we go then. Oh no, this is Brunchen now. Sorry, I'm blind. Into Brunchen, then to Ice-Curver. Caught out there. And that's the classic blunder down at Brunchen. And it catches one driver out already then. Amin Zar, the first victim, down in the Brunchen to Ice-Curver section. Down through Flansgart 9s then. That's a free position for Anthony Valorio. He's going to continue up road to find out what more positions he can have. We do have a very curious little fight here down through the run of Brunchen to Ice-Curver. This is between these two here. Hang on just a moment. We do have a sizable yellow flag out. I believe, getting a look at it here, it's the 92. It's Amin Zar is into the pit lane after that incident, so it only snowballed into an even worse incident for the number 92 Porsche. That could very well be the end of his race. Sadly, we don't know exactly what it snowballed into, but there was a follow-up incident not long thereafter. You can probably make the assumption, based off of stability concerns, that would have been out through Sprunghugel. Getting a quick look in here before we miss the opportunity to see them. You can see the Brustuli has been able to hold just a nice arm's length gap there off of Mr. Scallops. Knowing the kind of bullet train that the Nissan GTR can be, he's been able to attack through that final section of the Nordschleife to give himself as much a fighting chance down the Dottinger as humanly possible. Taking a look then on the trailing end of our first proper flying lap of things, we see for Pascal Stoltz not too far off their trails at all. Same story for Helge Lien and Marianelli, as well as Sutton. Sutton, though, closer to a chance of attacking Giacomo Marianelli as they cross the line. Brustuli with currently the fastest lap. Helge Lien 6th, Tamburini 7th. Amin Zar looks to drop effectively out of the GT3 standings here, down to 10th place as it stands, and it's only going to get lower for him still. You see in the time since observing them that De Tosto has torn away from Gagliolo and now is getting much, much closer. He's got radar lock on that number 12, and the cruise missile that is the 58 is hunting down second place in division. So as it stands then, as we catch back on board with them up through the Schumacher S, is still a very close at hand fight for the lead of this race between Marcelin Brustuli and Mr. Scallops. Currently Brustuli then leads with Scallops second, Pascal Stoltz in third, Giacomo Marianelli in fourth. Very close behind him, mind you, as well, is the number 7 of Steven Sutton. Behind him is the number 45 of Dion Helge Lien. Luca Tamburini in 7th with Anthony Valorio in 8th place, and Antonio Cardoso, so that's where the confusion came from, in 9th place with Mercedes AMG. Speaking of Mercedes AMG, they lead in GT4. Matthias de Munster up ahead of Tom Wells, now looking to be intercepted by Timo de Tosto, Division 3rd for McLaren. Marco Gagliolo, Division 4th, and ahead of that of Amin Zar and Alessandro Litti, who's just come in with major damages. Presently, I don't know if that will be enough to introduce Przemek Zulim to an additional change of position unless Amin Zar DNFs from this race. We do see that that won't be the case. The 92 is back out, but he has not yet served either of his mandatory pit stops and is now a lap down. So it's only really a matter of time then, in that sense. Alessandro Litti then in the pit lane. And as mentioned, I don't think this will give him enough of the advantage. He needs to see a position change early on, but if he keeps his head low, there's nothing to say that Przemek Zulim cannot find more positions by the end of today's race. Kicking dust up into the eyes of the Nissan there up through Flugplatz. Down towards Cottonborn. It's a little wobbly on corner entry. It's worth pointing out there for the Nissan. It is a little bit unstable on corner entry. It's got a little bit more to give on corner exit. I think that's got partially something to do with the amount of weight tilted over the nose. We see in the time since having checked in with Valorio, he's now gotten up past that of Luca Tamburini. Now up to 7th place. You've got to hand it to Valorio. He has not wasted any time taking it upon himself to charge up towards the rest of the field, considering he started out past the GT4s at one point in this race. We see here with Marco Gaioliolo with Alpine. This is a unique point of view. Not often do we get to watch from any of the Alpines, but Gaioliolo has been a very faithful customer for the Alpine A110 over the course of this season, and now he looks to go head-to-head in a fight with that of Timo de Tosto. We are now down a car. I believe that to be from that of the 123. Alessandro Litti came into the pits with damage, left with a drive-through penalty. Or a stop-go, my mistake there, for speeding in the pit lane. And has decided, nah, maybe not today. Do you have yellow flags out? It's for the 45. Helge Lien in trouble. Taking a look then. As you see here with Dion Helge Lien, nursing damage. There was an incident for him down through, currently taking a look here, this would have been out through Kallenhardt. So much of the same area that Mr. Scallops found trouble in during qualifying. The 45 now finds trouble still during the race, and that could leave him vulnerable to an advance there by Luca Tamburini, but the 45, you can see already, not interested in a fight. We'll take a look in here with him. We do see there is actually a bit of steering damage for Dion Helge Lien. So he will be into the pits if he can make it to the pit stop by the end of this lap. Taking a look in then with the leading pairs, we see things are razor thin still. 1 second between the 394 and the 293. Brustuli and Scallops on their way down through to Klostertal, just on the exit of the Mudkurve. Into Stylestrecker. Down through to Carousel. That was nice, neat and tidy from the pair of them there. You see from behind the second row of Stoltz and Marianelli, they're much, much closer, so there is definitely the conversation to be had over their fight for third. We'll stay on board here with Giacomo Marianelli, playing in parallels to the fight up in front between Scallops and Brustuli. Those two by about 7/10 of a second, much as the same story between these two here on their run. Now up through the Hohe Acht into Hedvigshohe. We'll leave you on board with Marianelli for just a moment. We'll be back to you in a moment. Just quickly observing here the gap between the leading pair before we catch back on board with a battle between Stoltz and Marinelli. You can see as well for Stoltz, such as the case with that 5-litre AJ V8 under the bonnet of his XKG3, he's just got a little bit more to give in the straightaways ahead of the 51 with its V6 behind the driver's seat. Calabro84 saying, dude, I have no idea how you managed to remember all the corner names. I hate to burst the magic for you here, burst the magic bubble, but it's I have a map. Even I don't remember. Most of them. I like to say I remember most of... You know what, let me just click off the map. I'm going to see how many I can remember. Wait until we actually get on to the Nordschleifer section. I'd be quite curious to know if I can remember the majority of them. Quickly taking a look in with some of the other battles going on. Of course, there is still the elephant in the room that is those first two rows of GT3 still clashing heads for first and third respectively. You can see closer still is the fight for Stoltz v Marinelli. Half a second before they've even hit the Nordschleifer. The 45 is in, so Helgelien managed to make his way to the pits, thankfully, and is able to come in to receive repairs to his wounded Ford. Now Brustuli takes the command of the field by 1.5 seconds. Up through to the Vidal chicane. We'll stay on board with Pascal Stoltz, I believe, here. We'll have a look in with both sides of this battle here, as we do see heading into the Hatzenbach section that things are getting a little bit closer among the front row, but obviously it is still razor thin on the second row of this grid. So we'll be cutting around these two, so to give some context, the Porsche v Nissan, that's for the race lead, and this is upon the second row for the last of the podium position. So staying on board here with Pascal Stoltz as we enter the Hatzenbach section. Bear in mind, we've set ourselves a little bit of a challenge here to see if we remember the majority of this circuit off of memory alone. So through the Hatzenbach section we go. This long, winding area of the track. Super, super difficult for drivers to get side by side in this area. Oh, hang on a moment. In the background, that was trouble for Giacomo Marinelli. So we might have to quickly have a little look over to see what has gone on for Marinelli at this time. And taking a look in, we find Velorio, but what happened to Marinelli is the real question. Trying to catch here, we do see Giacomo Marinelli, but he's been forced back into the iron sights of Steven Sutton. Considerable damage on him as we made our way out through the Kittelbacher Hohe in towards Flugplatz. We see here considerable loss of stability for the 51. He's having to play very, very safely here on his run through to Cottonborn. Half a second between himself and Sutton. We'll go to catch on board with Steven Sutton, as a matter of fact, to get the attacking point of view out through Schwedenkreuz in towards Auenberg. Then on to, I believe, Poststrasse here. It's just after Auenberg in towards Fuchsrohr. Staying on board then with Steven Sutton in towards the Adenauer Forst. Almost pushing Marinelli through that section there, parked so close to the rear bumper. Out through Adenauer Forst, coming up into the Metzgerfeld section. This is what brings us into the forest area of the track. Very, very tight section coming up here. Easy to make mistakes, as we've seen evidenced a few times on the run in towards Kallenhardt. Now, oh, just off in front of him there. Pumps the brakes because Marinelli's got into the wall. Big hit for him there just before Verseifen. Let's get a look at that on the replays. Front row tickets we've just had there from Stephen Sutton. This was on the run in towards Veerseifen. And there, just that rear left touched the grass, pivoted the car in, then it bounced off of the wall, ping-ponged across the track. And that got ugly very, very quickly for him. So that's the end of his fight for fourth. We currently see here with Stephen Sutton. Currently on a run towards Bergwerk as it stands. Still trying to remember the majority of track corner names off by heart. Sort of a little challenge we've set to ourselves there, but out through Bergwerk. So Sutton now separated from that of the 51. The 51 now into the pit lane. So for Giacomo Marianelli, his future in this event seems uncertain. It could be a potential DNF for the Ferrari. That was a big, big hit there for him. Already was nursing damage. And obviously that's been the straw to break the camel's back. In towards Mudker, there we go with Stephen Sutton. Heading in towards and through Klostertal, now to Stylestrecker. Now we're going to go catch on board with the leading pair, but just before we do, let's have a little look here with this fight between Gagliolo and Di Tosto. McLaren versus Alpine, a very rare sighting indeed. They're currently on their way through the very same section of the track that we saw that wipeout at before. This is down towards, I believe, looking at it here, this is, oh no, this is actually the, believe, is it not? No, that is Siphon, because this is the Ausfahrtbreitscheid here. And I think we've just had confirmation the 51 is out of this race. So that's the end of the line for Giacomo Marianelli. Taking a look in with our leading pair, we see currently on the run through Flansgarten 1 Intersprunghurgel as it appears there. Heading up in towards Flansgarten 2, so a little bit of dirt there kicked up by the leading 293. He's got to be careful through this section. One slip and it is a very quick trip to the wall. Out through Flansgarten 2 into Schwalbenschwanz. So maybe we ought to give ourselves a little bit more credit than we're due, because there's a surprising amount of the track I've still been able to remember. Might not be every single corner name, no doubt, but surprising amount. Out through Galgenkopf then. On to the Dottinger. And this has again been an area that's been quite frustrating for Mr. Scallops at this time. Because yes, he does technically, on paper, have the straight line speed advantage over the Porsche. But time and time again, he's not found himself close enough to capitalize with the extra slipstream. For Pascal Stolz, he's now found himself stranded at the back of the podium at a sizable distance from the rest of the field. Sutton in fourth by 9.7 seconds. Valorio 13.1 down to fifth. And Mr. Scallops up the road 15.3 up in second. So it's a bit of a lonely drive towards the top of things here for Stolz. So we'll go and catch back on board then with the current state of affairs among the GT4s, as we're still seeing this very engaging fight between Alpine and McLaren. This is Marco Gagliolo's point of view as he looks to challenge down through Brunchen onto the McLaren of Timo de Tosto. De Tosto deliberately gives him space upon the inside, knowing that the Alpine won't find the amount of strength to outpower him through that corner. But this is a proper David and Goliath situation we see here. 1.8 litre turbo inline 4 against 4 litre twin turbo V8. Undulating, unstable surfaces is Alpine's bread and butter. They were the world's first manufacturer to win the World Rally Championships. And some of that DNA, just a smidge, still exists in this very bizarre offshoot. Out through Flansgarten 2. currently then fighting for a division podium with De Tosto. This has made for some fantastic viewing down in GT4. Very late onto the brakes, though, into the wall goes Gagliolo. Big hit at the Schwalbenschwanz. Is that going to cause a lot more untoward damage for the Alpine? It doesn't appear to have done a great deal to his steering, but it has obviously knocked him off course down through the Schwalbenschwanz. So that's an early end to that fight, hopefully to see it pick back up a little later. We do see the 813 and the 888 both into the pit lanes here. As for the 293 versus the 394, these two still head-to-head, about a second away from one another, so constantly at arm's length. No real telling where that fight could go next, but still, the ball is in Brostoli's court. It's sort of his game to play here, nearly 30 minutes in to this race. We do see, just quickly, I mean, Zar was in a moment of trouble down through Brünchen. Same area of the track that he's been caught out before in the 92. We also see in the pit lanes, as of right now, appears to be that of Matthias de Munster. He's come in after the first 30 or so minutes. He'll be giving it until about 30 minutes left in this race for his second pit stop. We've seen the 90-minute races be split down like this into 30-minute chunks. Coming out of the pit lane, then goes the number 69. Re-emerges to the field presently as things stand there in, I believe, a Division 4th. Yeah, so in behind De Tosto, Gagliolo and Wells to a Division 4th place. Catching back up then with the previous fight at hand between De Tosto and Gagliolo, we see that the wounds have not yet healed. Still 8.5 seconds between Alpine and McLaren. In terms of nearby fights, it is definitely worth putting on the table here the suggestion of a fight between Valorio and Sutton. Two drivers very well aware of each other's game here. That could make for an interesting one. 2.2 seconds currently out though, so nothing to say yet that we're in full swing for a fight. It's definitely one that's on the table. Of course, the elephant in the room, that anywhere between 1.0 and 1.2 second gap that resides between Brostoli and Scallops. This is a real sort of stalemate they found themselves in. Two very, very closely matched drivers. Tom Wells, the likelihood is he'll be coming in to the pits on this lap specifically, as opposed to the next one up. He's still trying to size things up, like how De Munster has done, to where these are segmented into almost 30-minute chunks each. We do see here for Przemek Zulim, simple survival alone has gained him 2 positions in this race, because he's been able to out-survive and outlive basically the performances of quite a few drivers on the grid so far. Among them, I mean, Zar in the 92. We also saw from earlier on the 51 of Giacomo Marianelli, now out of this race as well, and the number 123 of Alessandro Litti. So for Przemek Zulim, he's entered into the session, albeit late, I think about a quarter to halfway through the first lap of this race. But for the little Aston Martin, it's perseverance. I think it's quite a compelling story we have coming off of here with the 91 down through Flansgarten 2 in towards the Schwalbenschwanz of never give up. Because that's anyone in that situation. They arrive to the race late. They start from the pit lane. They're well over like minutes down from the rest of the field. But he's not given up. It kind of goes to show then. It's quite a heartwarming little story we're seeing here from Aston Martin. Never, never give up. Go and look on here with the fight. Definitely closer than it's been so far between Brustuli and Scallops. This is in through Flansgarten 2. Actually, no, it's actually Flansgarten 1. So in towards the Sprunghügel, then to Flansgarten 2. We see just how close to the ragged edge these two are willing to take it. So taking a look in with the Nissan of Mr. Scallops, this is very much in the fight for first place. If he can hold on to even about half a second's worth of a gap, he'll be in that vital slipstream range on Brustuli. He could stand to have a go at challenging the race lead in towards the Schraubensschwanz, carrying a lot of weight with him there with the Nissan. Heading in towards the Kleines Carousel. He may, just a bit of a stumble by both of them. One washing out wide, one tucking in underneath in towards Galgenkopf. He may very well be in that Goldilocks zone. He may very well find himself in the slipstream. So now it's foot into the floor as we exit Galgenkopf. He's half a second out. Let's see what he can do. Meanwhile, the 41 gaining on the number 7. There is a fight ongoing between Valorio and Sutton. So we see here Brustuli hugging the left-hand side of the track, trying to cut off any advantage of slipstream away from Mr. Scallops. The Nissan is slowly reeling him in, 0.4 of a second, in towards Antonios Bucher. Could even drop to 0.3, 0.2 possibly, in towards Tiergarten. So now we understand that the parameters have got to be closer than half a second. But into the pits come both of the leading GT3s. They've got to time this one up to perfection, so slowing down, no troubles there for either Brustuli or Scallops as they come into the pits. Well, the 172, we'll see what Pascal Stolz is thinking of doing with Jaguar. Making his way round to the start-finish straight. On with the Jaguar. And also coming into the pits then comes Pascal Stolz. We do see, hang on a tick here. 92 had yellow flags. That was Amin Zara, if I'm not mistaken. With Porsche, ran into a spot of bother there. Let's go and catch on board just briefly here. Number 12, somehow fighting with the number 45. I mean, I don't believe my eyes here. We also see coming into the pits the battle between Valorio and Sutton coming to an abrupt end. Both of them diving for the pit lane. Tom Wells, this is the in-lap for him. The 293 has a stop-go 30-second penalty. So that is for, if I'm not mistaken, yes, Marcelin Brustuli has a stop-go. Mr. Scallops stands upon the ground to lead in this race here at the Nürburgring. And this is absolutely cataclysmic for Brustuli. Pascal Stolz then on his way out. Sutton, then Valorio. Tamburini currently out on track. The 813, heavy ping warning there. We've seen him stuttering around the screen for some time here. You see for Antonio Cardoso onto the Dottinger Hohe. Helgelian now having broken away from the GT4 field. But Tom Wells, he needs to make sure this pit stop does not last him more than 55 seconds. That's the current gap tallied between himself and Matthias de Munster. That could still be smaller between the pair. And the number 69 inevitably makes his way on to the Dottinger Hohe. I'm gonna look that word up. I feel like that might actually be a real word. completely out of context there, but... that is actually a real word. Someone in Twitch chat said Flügelgeheimen. That apparently translates roughly to air score, according to Google Translate. It's either that or like air time, maybe. You see here, 41 versus the 7. In the meantime, then the number 12 has actually stayed out, where Timo de Tosto has come in. Marco Gagliolo will go to check to see what the Alpine's up to. Is into the pits. Goes De Tosto in front. Gagliolo with a bit of damage here. Maybe considering his odds for a pit lane entry. You see there, steering himself to the pit lane entry. So in goes Marco Gagliolo. So up to second will go Matthias de Munster as things stand there. Tom Wells staying out the extra lap. Is that going to prove to be the Achilles heel in terms of his current strategy? As we saw, that gap was 55 seconds between the pair. If he was to run into the pit lane, he would have still had that 55-second advantage over de Munster. But over the course of this lap, we already know he's about 3 seconds off the pace of the Mercedes. So that could have just compromised his current pit strategy. So then, after the first half hour of racing, the current score of it is, with Michael Imbrostuli in the lead with a stop-go 30-second penalty, it looks to be not long to the case that Mr. Scallops will lead in the Nürburgring. Pascal Stoltz currently third, with Sutton fourth, Valorio 3 seconds behind in fifth, Luca Tamburini in sixth, Antonio Cardoso in seventh, and Dion Helgelian back into the GT3 spread in eighth, but by the looks of it there, with even more damage on the Mustang. So has it come to be the case here in the vital moments where he could very well have found himself still fighting with Mr. Scallops for the championship? Has it fallen apart for him? Now, it won't be enough, I don't think, looking here to define the championship title for the GT3s. Looking at it in the current calculations between Scallops and Helgelian, they find themselves separate by 14 points. That's 1-4. So he needs to outscore him by an additional 18 points to a 32-point tally to make himself numerically impossible to catch. Now, with Scallops second with the fastest lap, which I believe is an extra point there, on top of what is currently 27 points, and Helgelian in eighth, that currently makes the tally of 13 points. That's only a difference of 14 points, actually 15 points when you consider the extra point there. So he is very close, don't get me wrong, very close, but no cigar. However, there is yet one possibility to consider. Rostuli isn't likely to drop all the way down to 8th on a stop-go 30. Hell, I don't even know if he's going to drop to the back of the top 5 on a stop-go 30. It's possible, but what that means is Scallops moves up into the lead, and unless Helgelian gains a position from this stop-go, that now puts the tally from 33 points. If we were to consider a fastest lap is adding a point, otherwise 32. I don't think it's going to play much of an impact because 32 points over 13 is 19 points of a difference. He needs 18 to clear the championship. So Mr. Scallops is actually very likely to be within a chance here of claiming the championship unless Helgelian can find more positions. That's the way it stands at the moment. That's based off of rough calculations. We're going to refine that over the next 49 minutes and get back to you, hopefully, with something a little bit more concrete. But as it stands, if Helgelian finishes 8th and Scallops finishes in the lead, regardless of fastest lap, That is a 19-point difference. And he needs 18 points over Helgelian to close out the championship because he needs to leave this with 32 points to his name. J-Max Ulim is into the pit lane to serve his first pit stop. You see coming in then the Aston Martin. On at the moment with Timo de Tosto. 293. Still has 2 laps to serve. So as data would indicate there, Brostuli stayed out. So he's going to try and run this one out for as long as he possibly can. He's on a serious push phase now to try and get as much distance up over between himself and Mr. Scallops. He knows he's going to lose the race lead. He knows he's going to lose the race lead unless Mr. Scallops crashes. He still possibly holds on to a chance of a top 5. I would say is even within well chances to find himself in 3rd by the end of this race, pace-wise, just to that alone. So as we get to the halfway mark of this race here, taking a look at the current tally of things. Brostuli leads ahead of Scallops 2nd, Stoltz 3rd, with Sutton 4th, Valorio 5th, Tamburini 6th, Cardoso 7th, Helgelian 8th, but into the pit lane goes the number 45 after incurring damages in the last lap just gone. Wells currently 9th and leading GT4, but still yet to have come into the pits. We'll see this to be the case that he comes in now. But it has made a very confusing precedent in terms of his pit strategy because he has left so much time on the table over this first stint that now, looking at it, most drivers aiming to put this in a group of thirds here, 30, 30, 30 to make a 90-minute race. That perfectly splits 2 pit stops. That's what Matthias de Munster's been up to over the course of this race. For Wells's case, he's gone actually halfway through on the first stint, but he still has 1 more pit stop left to serve. So is he going, what, 50, 25, 25 in terms of percentile? Very confusing stuff, though, for Wells. We'll see whether or not that strategy was worth it, because De Munster is catching up at a fast rate of knots. I did say when he decided to stay out, he elected to stay out not long after De Munster had finished his pit stop, that this was going to compromise him in the long run, and that has come to be the case. Tom Wells saying Helgelien has a dropped 5th place to factor in for GT3. So that is true. If this comes to be Helgelien, but that's the thing, if this is Helgelien's worst result, this is factoring in, and it's good that he mentioned this, the drop point system. So looking at Helgelien's current tenure, yes, so all right, that would come to be the case here, that numerically he would still be within the fight, because that 8th place would be dropped. The 5th place would take its place, and if we'd have gone off of these results, Mr. Scallops isn't exactly about to lose out a perfectly good 2nd or 1st. His worst result of the season was a podium, if you can believe that or not. And if we were to take a look into what that would do for scoring, that would mean, yes, 32 points if Scallops goes on to win this race, which is looking very likely to, with Brostoli's stop go 30 still valid. That means the points difference from 5th to 1st is only going to be a factor, looking here, doing the rough maths, of about 15 points. So he's actually 3 points in the clear to stay in this championship fight in Spa. Okay, so that's actually a great thing that Wells mentioned that. Perhaps you ought to start doing the commentary more than I do, because I would have never picked up on that point until way, way after the race. So many numbers to crunch and such little time to do so. But as we see then, for Helgelien, all is not yet lost. Because this 8th place will be getting dropped in favour of that 5th place that he managed to pick up in, I believe it was Snetterton last round, where he picked up that 5th place. That was ultimately expunged under the drop point system, but that's going to quickly come back into play to give him the best possible chance. So for Helgelien, it is simply a factor of just survive this race. 41.5 minutes. He's done his 2nd pit stop. He's fixed the car up. He's got plenty enough fuel to get himself to the checkered flag. All his priority resides upon now is see that checkered flag by any means necessary. In terms of the sensitive situation up over the front row, Brostoli, we can still see, is hammering down the 293. The 394 is staying close behind. It means that any of his efforts to try and put distance up over Mr. Scallops is failing at this time. He will eventually need to come in and serve that stop go. Otherwise, it will be considerable penalties or perhaps even disqualification if he does not. I think Brostoli knows that this is somewhat of a sundown chapter for him in that 293. He's buying himself time, knowing he's going to have to fight like hell for the next 40.5 minutes, including another pit stop as well. So while his chances to win back-to-back here after his debut in Snetterton may have just dried up, that does not mean he cannot still pick up a solid result in today's race. And moreover, there are still chances for more wins for him next week at the season finale at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. So I'll leave you on board with Marcelin Brostoli. Curious to see then what he chooses to do on this stop go. We'll leave you with Brostoli. We'll be back in a moment. turn as we cut away from Marcelin Broscioli into the pit lane to service stop go 30. We see with Pascal Stoltz now moving up to second. Mr. Scallops up into the lead of the race. We check in here with Stephen Sutton now up to third in this race as well for Anthony Valorio, who was not too far behind at all. He now marks the 4th place spot, pushing Marcelin Broscioli down to 5th. Question is, looking further in with Luca Tamburini on his way through Tiergarten. Broscioli just having been released. Down towards the line he goes. Served his stop and go. Back out on track. So just avoids losing out the back of the top 5 there to Luca Tamburini. We do find ourselves, though, with a new landscape, and heralding its new command, really, is the 394 of Mr. Scallops. Now, almost did we have it to where the calculations were saying he was going to take the championship here and now. We do just see a sudden turn of fate there. Marco Gagliolo ran into trouble on the run down towards Friedenkreuz and Poststrasse. This could potentially be the end of the road here for the 30, as he's been towed back to the pit lane. His fate still, as of yet, unknown. We can see the full tally of drivers at the moment, down to 13 from whence we started. That could still drop more numbers by the end of this race. Wait to see what the going rates on that are for the number 30, still towed into the pit lane, so no current updates there from Alpine. Taking a look then before we get to the last 30 minutes of racing set to follow. Plenty more pit stops on the way then around that time, as per the 30%, 30%, 30% rule, or 33 recurring if you want to be very specific about it. Splitting it down into the rule of thirds for the strategy of pit stops. We have Mr. Scallops leading the charge now. We have the fastest lap, Marcelin Broscioli, currently in 5th as it stands, as the standings are a little slow to update. So Pascal Stoltz 2nd, Stephen Sutton in 3rd, Anthony Valorio in 4th, Marcelin Broscioli 5th, with Luca Tamburini in 6th. The big step out for him there through the Vidal. That could have gotten ugly for the 813. Fortunately, kept the car pinned in and didn't run into any further trouble. Antonio Cardoso 7th with Dion Helgalian presently in 8th place, but completely cleared to the checkered flag here. Knows that all he has to do is see the checkered flag, knowing the drop point system will do the rest for him, and he'll still be 3 points in the green to continue to fight for the championship title against Mr. Scallops next weekend at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Matthias de Munster leads the GT4s ahead of Tom Wells in 2nd. Timo de Tosto, as it stands there, in 3rd place, not too far away off of Wells' current position. That's set to get closer when you consider we're about to head on to the Dottinger Hoa, a section where Ginetta is of great disadvantage on this grid, despite 40 kilos off under balance of performance. We see for Marco Gagliolo, their fate still left uncertain, as though technically 4th on grid. They are 4th on class grid, I should say. They do find themselves still in the pit lane after their emergency stop. But Przemek Zulim, it could be an upgrade to 4th. And that it is. Przemek Zulim now updated to match 4th place in division. I mean, you got to hand it to him here. This is quite remarkable. He's joined in late and has made the most of what he can. And it's a bit of a case where he's just been able to keep his head low. He's out of trouble. He's not finding himself making any mistakes that could cost him his performance today. We see into the pits goes Matthias de Munster. We'll see what the going rates are here for Tom Wells. We know these two have been trying to find suitable counter plays off of one another. In terms of strategy, will it be the case where Wells isn't looking to risk it again, heading down towards the line? No, he is going to go for it. Ever the gambler then in the number 12. He's going to roll the dice on this one. As for De Tosto, he's following suit. So this is slightly earlier than expected for De Munster. We were expecting about another lap before he came in. Evidently, he likes things to be a little earlier than later. Getting closest to the 30-minute mark was his absolute priority. Otherwise, he would have been up to 5 minutes out on the 30-minute mark. Taking a look in here. Definitely a conversation to be had on this one. 0.6 of a second. Sutton versus Valorio. Let's stay on board with these two in the upcoming fight for 3rd. down through Kesselchen. You can see the Ferrari is gaining, but in towards Mudcover has to back off. Forward with gulps of fresh air over the front aero, is able to poke in just a little bit harder than the Ferrari at that time, down through towards Stylestrecker. Looking in through the carousel. Now, we've seen battles like this play out before, and it's really a case that we don't quite understand now what could happen between these two as they make their way on towards the Dottinger. We're hoping to see it the case where tucking into the slipstream is going to do Valorio some favours, but we've seen very similar situations play out, namely on that leading fight earlier on between Brustoli and Scallops. And even though the Nissan on paper had better straight line speed, that push towards the race changing position never really materialized. Could it be different then in this fight for the last of the podium positions? We know how strong Ford is, and the Ferrari on great BOP today does stand to challenge them. We'll see exactly how the needle drops when we get in towards the Dottinger Hohe not too long from now. We're on the run out through Brünchen, into Eiskurve, into Flansgarten 1. Heading into the Sprunghügel, this is going to be an exciting one. You can see very nearly catching up of all four wheels between the pair as they make their way up and around into Flansgarten 2. Super close here between the pair. It's wonderful to get a view in from the driver's point of view just to see the verticality of this section at play. It's like a roller coaster ride for GT3s on their run in towards the Schwalbenschwanz. Still at some point want to visit this circuit myself. I saw a really good suggestion by one of the viewers in chat that they're planning to do a European trip for their 50th, where they're hoping to do Spa 24, Le Mans 24 and Nürburgring 24. That does sound rather nice, to be fair. So I've heard, though, getting to Le Mans is very expensive indeed. But if you want a cheaper alternative to Le Mans, we do have a 90-minute race at Le Mans next week with the folks over at MSC. That'll be in and around 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time on Wednesday next week. We see, though, in this fight for third, unlike what was going on for the fight of the race lead between Brustoli and Scallops, we are seeing Slipstream actually do something here on the Dottinger between Valorio and Sutton. They're side by side out through to Tiergarten, and it's contact between the pair. A huge hit into the wall for Steven Sutton. Absolutely cannoned into the wall there by Valorio. The slightest of taps at speeds like this can be catastrophic. We saw there one tap, bang, into the wall. Absolutely brutal. Trying to get a look in then with the Mustang to assess the scope of damage we see into the pit lane. In spite of the enormous strike he had against the wall, somehow the steering is not yet compromised on the number 7 of Steven Sutton. But I suppose better time than ever, considering this actually lines up rather nicely with the rule of thirds for a split of pit stops in a 90-minute race. As Sutton is into the pits himself for one last time today. Just under 30 minutes then left to go. Valorio stays out. Minimal damages, of course, to the Ferrari. Did not see the worst end of it. Tamburini also in the pit lane at this time, which you see here from Przemek Zulim's point of view. Currently on for a Division 4th. Little Aston that could then. The 91 started, I think it was near enough half a lap down there, and entered late into the session, so had a little bit more time to wait in the pit lane before he could come out and play. And in spite of all of that, is not only in top 5 stead of his class, B, he's also 4th place in class. So that is still a remarkable thing to consider, given the circumstances at play. Most people would assume you join halfway through the opening lap, most people would leave. Especially at the Nürburgring, a track of this size, the largest freestanding circuit in the world. But not Zulem. That's quite a special story, that. That is quite a special story, and I hope that goes down throughout the championship there as a very historic piece there. You see, for Matthias de Munster, strategically has got that upper hand over Wells and De Tosto. 45 seconds won't be enough to shelter the 12 from the arrival of the 69. Matthias de Munster is looking to take command of this championship in the absence of Ladislav Mizid. He's also hunting, when looking back in through the previous wins this season, de Munster will be looking for his 3rd so far in Season 3. He took his first one at round 3 of the championship, then last round just gone in Snetterton did he take his 2nd amidst a newfound victory for Marcelin Brostuli in GT3. And this could very well be the scope of his 3rd. We do have actually another warning in through there. Yellow flags again for the number 30, Marco Gagliolo. And oh, that is quite heavy front end damage. I must commend him on the fact that we did originally believe the 30 was going to be out of this race. He stayed in the pits for some time, nursing that damage. He's trying to find a salvage road, but sadly won't be able to find it this time. You got to hand it to him for wanting to get back out on track here, but we'll see exactly how that plays out. The number 30. We've just got word that the number 30, sadly, now is out of this race. It is a shame, but obviously luck has a pretty horrible way of working against some people. He's just had bad luck in this race. It happens to at least one driver every time we go to the Nords. They get knocked down, they get back up, they get knocked down even harder. They keep getting back up. Something has to give in that situation. But I think, yeah, his frustrations are quite justifiable in that situation. He's come out from already being stuck in the pits for some time, having lost out position in the grid. He's come back out. The car has let him down again. That Alpine, it can be a serious handful. While it might be a joy to drive at, say, Brands Hatch or Zolder or Alton Park, for example, I can't imagine it being super comfortable for something like the Nürburgring. You see here, this is the fight between Wells and De Tosto, currently boiling over. De Tosto having gained in considerable ground over Wells. Presently, this is for division lead, but strategically, both of them stand to lose out to Matthias de Munster with Mercedes. We'll stay on board, though, with Timo De Tosto, making our way down towards turn 1, in towards the Yokohama S. Quickly gunning over to the defending angle of things with the current class lead being the Ginetta of Tom Wells, fighting for first place away from Timo De Tosto. V6 against V8. You see, though, by nature of having run his strategy out long, Wells is struggling. You can see those tyres are starting to give up on him. Heading up through the Schumacher S's. Also running out wide. Again, it's worth pointing out, he's not alone in the fact that he's been running a strategy out long. So too has De Tosto. Looking at the point of view of Stephen Sutton, he's back in with a vengeance. He's determined to see a top 5 by the end of this race. Strategically, still has that on the cards here. Antonio Cardoso is 3.5 seconds up the road. And as and when he comes into the pit lane, That's if he doesn't get intercepted by the time we reach the pit lane next. Sutton will gain that extra position. With 23 minutes to the line, has a great chance, if he keeps his head low here, to see a top 5 finish by the end of today's race. Looking quickly back in then with Timo de Tosto. In through the Hatzenbach section. This is an area where the McLaren does appear to be struggling just a little bit in terms of stability. Maneuverability, that's not a concern. It's still able to turn in just as hard as the Ginetta in front, but it's those curbs. Those curbs are really starting to mess with him. There can definitely be the consideration when put up against their GT3 counterparts. There is a lot less sort of maneuverability in terms of setup for these cars, especially in that suspension. While yes, it can be tuned and tweaked to the driver's liking, there's far less leniency towards track-like conditions like we see with higher curbs, rumble strips. The GT4s have been a little bit wirier around the edges, and that's because they're much, much closer to road-faring technology. These are effectively the rich man's touring car. That's what a GT4 effectively is. While it's supposed to be the cheaper alternative to get junior and younger drivers in towards GT racing on that climb up towards GT3, and then they can continue to propel that forward even to perhaps the heights of prototype racing, LMP2, LMP, well, would have been LMP1, LMH now, or LMDH, or GTP. I don't discriminate. Could be IMSA. The GT4s still find themselves following a lot of the same patterns as the humble touring car. It is really only about a coin toss away from being a road car in most situations, especially in the case of some manufacturers like McLaren, where you can buy a lot of the technology that makes a 570S a 570S from the factory. It's called the 620R, if I'm not mistaken. You can just buy one of them, and that's a... well, not a one-to-one, of course. It is flared up and given a little bit more power to make it more attractive as a track toy, but it is still a lot of the same technology used to homologate a program for GT4. In Ginetta's case, the G55 was upgraded from the Cup car, the G55, to match GT4 regulations. For Porsche, they used the 718 GT4, aptly named GT4 RS, to homologate a lot of the technology that's in the Cayman Club Sport. For Alpine's A110, they had the A110R, if I'm not mistaken. And for Aston Martin, they had the AMR package for the V8 Vantage. I believe this is, funnily enough, a lot of the same aero you will find on the safety car in Formula 1. Number 41 has a stop-go 30-second penalty, so that's for Anthony Valorio. That could still force Stephen Sutton up, potentially even into the scope of a potential podium by the end of today's race. As we see here, De Tosto is closing ground over Wells at a fast rate of knots here. And it's that difference in straight line speed that is really harming Tom Wells in his choice with Ginetta. Would we ever want to see him choose a different manufacturer? Absolutely not. He fits the car like a glove, and he's been able to do great things with it over the course of this season. But this has been one of the rare instances where that car's letting him down. And there's not a great deal he can do in that situation. That's going to be the same story in Spa next week, where heading up the Kemmel is going to be a huge problem for him, going toe-to-toe with cars like the McLaren 570S, currently driven here by Timo de Tosto. In the pits then presently, Antonio Cardoso, we've just got wind of that information. You close in on the last 20 minutes of racing. Still a few stones left unturned here. That stop-go 30 is definitely spelling some great news for Marcelin Bruschtuli. Because as it stands there, it's going to force him up into the scope of 4th place not long from now. For Stephen Sutton up in 4th right as we speak, 13.5 seconds up the road from Bruschtuli. He's going to be looking at the scope of moving in to 3rd place by the end of this race. And that is a real turnaround for Sutton when you consider, just looking back a few, I think even just a lap or two ago, actually, to the incident between himself and Valorio down through Antonio Spocher and Tiergarten. That was 2 laps ago, and he was cannoned into that wall. To have come back from such damages, kept the ball rolling, and now look at the chance of 3rd place. I mean, that stands to reason as a great comeback drive here for Sutton. Bear in mind the gap between himself and, looking at it here, Dion Helge-Lien, 18 points between the pair. But of course, there is, much like the consideration there has been, much like there's been in the calculations for the lead, there is the drop point system coming in to save some of the salvage there from Helge-Lien today. That 5th place that he picked up in Snetterton will now count if he is to finish 8th today. Calibro84 asking, how did Valorio get the stop go? Must have missed that speeding in the pit lane. That's how it ended up happening there. So in the last pit stop that he did just a while ago, he picked up the stop go for speeding in the pit lane. It's a bit of an abrupt entry to the pits. I don't know how many opportunities more we'll have to see runs to the pit lane. Probably off of these two here on their way in towards Tiergarten. We see they're going up and around just as we catch them. De Tosto up and ahead of Wells. There, hits the curb. So nearly hits Wells, but into the wall. Timo De Tosto slides across the crash barriers, narrowly avoiding Tom Wells. Big off. We see here into the pit lane. This is what we're talking about. Very abrupt stop for these two here. Very easy in that sense to run into trouble. That was all manner of sketchy for the number 58. He's been quite fortunate to come away from that with what looks to be, much like Sutton's incident at the very same section of the track, he's come away with superficial injuries to car structure. So he's got aero damage, don't get me wrong. There is going to be problems if he were to keep it that way, but he's not had steering damage, which means the repair time should, in theory, be shorter. Regardless, both of them are in. Matthias de Munster moving up then to division lead, up and ahead of Wells and De Tosto. Past the pit lane he goes. Oh, hang on a second. What's gone on there? Don't tell me. Oh, don't tell me. He's crossed the line, but where is... Oh, no. You're joking. You are joking me. Wow, that is such a... What? So he's disconnected. Matthias de Munster, in spite of the fact that he was just there, just in front of us, went across the line and disconnected. 15 minutes left to go. I mean, that's gut-wrenching. That is the worst possible. We talk about bad timing. That is the worst possible timing for a disconnect like that. He literally just got into the lead. Well, I mean, this has gifted the opportunity here for Tom Wells. You see, Matthias de Munster has rejoined, but will find himself facing down very bizarre circumstances later on in this race. 14.5 minutes left to go. He joins in behind De Tosto and Wells by that metric. And Zhemak Zulim could very likely find himself actually up for a podium with Aston. Won't speak too early on that yet. Still a lot more to decide in the next 14 minutes. What has now suddenly shifted is away from what was originally a fight for what was going to be effectively second in this race, has now elevated itself to a potential first race win for either Tom Wells or Timo De Tosto in this championship. So not only does this stand upon some serious history in the making, because this will not only mark the first time in Season 3 that Mercedes has not won a race, interrupting what has been the longest single manufacturer stream of race wins in this series when you don't consider one-off categories like when we had the M2 Cups back in Season 1 or the Porsche Cups thereafter. It is a case where of the multi-manufacturer grid since the implementation of the static GT3, GT4 config in Season 2, that this is the single longest streak of wins any one manufacturer has held on to. And it's been one car, albeit two drivers, but the same car, AMG GT4, Mercedes. And this is about to come to an end, but by who? Who interrupts this streak? Who dismantles Mercedes' throne? As it stands then, it looks to be Ginetta. Because as you can see, only just entering the Hatzenbach section is Timo de Tosto now with McLaren. Tom Wells got the spring on him through the pit lane, and now on his run down towards the run of Flugplatz, because of the damage repairs for the 58, he is off by quite a distance here, with Matthias de Munster now rejoining the circuit, albeit until we have any update on it, I believe is now still in for a podium in GT4 and will still be well within the fight for GT4's championship by the time we get to the end of next race next weekend. So all is not yet lost for de Munster. 11th outright in the race, but 3rd in division. Still a few more pieces to fall into place here. And among them is Anthony Valorio. Has 2 more laps to serve that stop go. And I believe he'll be serving it on this lap here, lap 9 of this race with 11 minutes left to go. He won't have enough time in the next lap after to go around the track and then serve the stop go 30. Because the next lap coming will be our last. For Przemek Zulim, he's got the right side indicator on. Is that likely then him indicating that he's coming into the pits? I mean, it's very early and who's even around to see it? Oh, well, I mean, it's a gentlemanly rule. Befitting then of an Aston Martin. Heading into the pits then goes Przemek Zulim. Onto his last pit stop of the race. I mean, you've got to hand it to him. Given the circumstances at play, the fact that he has stuck things out and is looking at 4th, that is not too bad at all. Looking to catch on board then with the current scope of things at the forefront of GT4. We see that things now 26 seconds apart between De Tosto and Wells. Wells has been sort of rolled out the red carpet here for Ginetta's first ever victory. Just taking a look back through, we'll get some updates on this, but I am quite curious to see how precisely this stacks up historically in this championship going back through Season 2 when the GT3, GT4 classification was introduced. Taking a look at them GT4s. So no, this is not Tom Wells' first rodeo. He did actually take a race win in Imola. So it's not his first ever race win, but it is his first this season and the first we've seen of a Ginetta win since Season 2, Round 1. So this is a long win drought for the number 12. So it's still going to feel gratifying to him to see the checkered flag first among the fray in the GT4s. That'll be the first time he's done so since the start of last season. In terms of race wins here for Mr. Scallops, looking back throughout the season then with the Nissan, not only was he last season's champion, but taking a look into this season so far, we do find it to be the case that this breaks what has been so far to make it 3 weeks, including that delay, worth of a race-winning drought. As Stephen Sutton picked up round 5's race win, Marco-Leon Brustoli in round 6, so he'll be back onto form since his last win at round 4, also many weeks ago, back in February. This will mark his 4th this season if he's able to see the checkered flag first among the fray in the next lap coming. For Pascal Stoltz, this is looking to be, after what has been a bit of a hiatus for him, having dropped down to 7th since leaving the championship at round 4 in Paul Ricard through to round 5, round 6, where he didn't make any appearances, to come back into this and then pick up on what is looking to be his best result of the season so far. His last result on the podium would have been a 3rd place finish in Watkins Glen right towards the start of the season at round 2. So to come straight back into it and one up his best finishing result in Season 3, that's quite an interesting one here from Stoltz. Of course, a driver that understands this circuit very, very well. This car and driver and track matchup is one we have seen before in the Carousel Cup during the final GT3 round. So then, dropping into the final scope of things, one more car to consider really among the masses here, that being Anthony Valorio. Whereabouts does he stand to drop in on this grid? Now, the calculations that we have it shown that he's going to be falling in just ahead of Luca Tamburini. So he's going to drop down to 5th, with Brustoli up to 4th, Sutton on for a podium. And this is definitely going to make for a very bizarre podium indeed here in the Nürburgring, but I suppose we're better on the calendar to see such precarious results arise. As for the rest of the field, Tamburini looks to potentially stay where they are here, though they will be making up time to Valorio in 5th place. Won't be, as it stands by, enough to gain position. They'll remain in 6th place. Cardoso 7th, Helgelian in 8th. Then looking into the GT4s, Wells still leading, albeit having lost 4 seconds off to De Tosto, but with only one more lap coming up after this one, chances don't present themselves particularly likely for the McLaren to take away what has been a very long drought of a lack of race wins here for the number 12. The first time he'll see the checkered flag, first among the fray in class since Season 2, Round 1. Now he's really on the home stretch of it. Not much less left, I should say, to consider. As we see there, Mr. Scallops begins the final run of things here in the Nürburgring. For Valorio, this is really the Requiem knell. So then, very likely to be making his way into the pits. It's now or never, really, for Valorio. Let's see what will he elect to do. Very, very, very likely that he's going into the pits. As he makes his way onto the start-finish straight, that's exactly what he's going to do. Into the pit lane goes the 41 then. And in the time since, it is worth pointing out just how close we do have on some of these gaps here. Helgelian to Cardoso, 7/10 of a second. And then taking a look further in behind from 5th to 4th, it's only a second between Brustoli and Sutton. So where Sutton thought it could be a breezy drive here onto that last lap, to take home a podium, he is now going to find himself facing both barrels of Marcolin Brustuli as we make our way into the last lap of racing here in round 7. And this will be one we pay very close attention to here. From the point of view of the attacking car, on with the Porsche of Marcolin Brustuli. This is the fight for third place between himself and Stephen Sutton. And this is what will preside over that last lap of the race for a greater part of it. Now, bear in mind, there is also the other fight going on at this time between Helguillian and Cardoso. And taking a look at that gap as they head on to the Dottinger, 1.3 seconds between the Mustang and the Mercedes. Now, far enough away to not be caught up by dramatic amounts of slipstream. This could stand to raise between Helguillian and Cardoso. 1.4 seconds as they make their way uphill. We'll catch on with them towards the end of this race, but really our focal point here, Brustuli v Sutton, back on board then with the Porsche. The attacking part of this two-car fight for the last of the podium positions and what has been brazen war here in the Nürburgring. Tremendous soundtrack there from the flat six on the Porsche. Much too is the same from the Mustang. We'll catch on board with Sutton in just a moment's time. We watch here from the attacking view of the fight of third place, heading up towards the Hatzenbach. You can see he almost parked on his rear bumper. Brustuli leaving very, very little room to spare. Heading through to the Hatzenbach. I think it's best if we get back on board with the dash cam view here. Best view in the house. Either that or, to think one better, the helmet cam, to give a sense of just how the attitude of the car is like at the moment. That's going to get nauseating after a few corners. We'll save you the motion sickness of seeing that. Up towards Flugplatz we go then. Bear in mind, in these straightaway sections, it's going to be difficult for the Porsche to stay with. He's going to have to rely on slipstream, giving the lights there to Stephen Sutton, looking to challenge on the run out through Cottonborn, in towards Schwedenkreuz. They're side by side on the run up towards Schwedenkreuz, but he's going to have to go the long way around. Bear in mind, the Porsche has better stopping power and electing to swing over the nose there with Sutton backing off. Brustuli moves up to third, in towards Auenberg and Poststrasse. Just quickly seeing here with Wells, a bit of an incident for him there at Stylestrecker. But bear in mind, now catching on board with Sutton's point of view, down through Fuchsrohr, in towards the Adenauer Forst, on with the Ford of Stephen Sutton, now forced into the attacking angle of this fight. Bear in mind, if he can catch Brustuli or stay with him until we get to the Adenauer, not to the Adenauer, sorry, to the Dottinger, then he is going to be able to intercept that Porsche. Where Nissan failed before, Ford is very, very unlikely to repeat those mistakes. When it comes to straight line speed, there is seldom comparison on this grid to that 7th gen Mustang. The problem is, there is a long, long drive now between themselves and the Dottinger Hoher. So for Sutton, he's got to cling on to dear life here in the hopes to take home a podium here in the Nürburgring. Praying for an issue up ahead of him for that 293. We see, though, running a little bit wide out through the Asphalt Breitscheid. Dropping more and more time away. Sutton drops down to 4th, 1.7 seconds now away from Brustuli. Taking a look in some of the other fights, we see that Cardoso v Helguillian has quickly dissipated out 2.5 seconds between the pair on this final lap. One to possibly consider, though I believe perhaps a little too far away for where they're at, would have been Tamburini v Valorio. 9 seconds between the pair. For Mr. Scallops, we see this is somewhat of a parade lap for him now. He's far enough up the road to not be challenged for this lead. 40 seconds up the road from Pascal Stoltz in towards Flanskart 9s. We're on board with the Nissan. As we see for Tom Wells, he's about 53 seconds up the road, just entering the Dottinger Ruhr. Unlikely to be intercepted by the Nissan by the time that it gets to the checkered flag. That will mean that under these set of circumstances, Wells will have to do another lap of the Nürburgring. But I believe the session timer will catch him before the end of this session. Fuel miscalculation reported from the number 12. So Tom Wells could be in serious trouble here. Serious trouble. That could invite in a win for Timo de Tosto. We'll wait to see exactly what's gone on there. It's because of that fuel miscalc. He's going to have to, I believe, come into the pits before his last lap, effectively. As the race end is decided by the leading car, that being this on screen, the number 394, Mr. Scallops, looking to break a 2-race-long drought of wins. Wells into the pit, so de Tosto is going to come through to take the lead of this race for the GT4s. Before that, though, heading down through Antoniusbucher, Mr. Scallops has seen through thick and thin there, hell and high water here in the Nürburgring Nordschleife, breaking the tally off of what has been 2 rounds without a race win. He's back onto form once again, continuing to open the taps up over his championship endeavours. We're so close to the chances of it today, but we'll take this all the way to the end of the line next week in Spa. Nonetheless, he wins here in the Nürburgring. A great show of force there by Mr. Scallops. Fought through it all to see himself rise to the top once again. His 4th win this season, and in glorious fashion. Seeing themselves to the checkered flag then. A brilliant result on return for Pascal Stoltz. Bear in mind, he's been out of this for 3 rounds now. Comes back into the series to one-up his best finishing result, which he picked up in Watkins Glen. Down towards the line we go then for Pascal Stoltz. It's 2nd place for Jaguar. Markelin Bruchtuli as he enters the Dottinger. Only 2 seconds away from Stephen Sutton. Now, we don't know how much that's set to reduce down the Dottinger. As we see, that's actually climbed up an extra second. So a really unoptimal exit of Galgenkopf has otherwise sullied what could have been a possible last straight dash between Sutton and Bruchtuli. Nonetheless, it was a very close fight, giving us definitely much to talk about on the run in towards this last lap. But for Bruchtuli, it's back-to-back podiums, where he took his race win on debut in Snetterton. He'll make his way down towards the line here after dealing with some very difficult, let's say, circumstances for the 293. He'll see the checkered flag still persevering for that podium. Back-to-back podiums then for the number 293. Mr. Scallops, your race winner in GT3 as it stands. We'll still wait to see what the definitive answer is on GT4, though it does look to reside in the courts of the number 58. As it stands then, Luca Tamburini actually up to 5th place on this grid right now. We'll see 5th at the end of this race. So that's 2 Porsches inside of the top 5 in the trailing end of today's race here at the Nürburgring. Down across the line then, Tamburini for 5th. For Anthony Valorio, it's been a tough one for him today. Nonetheless, sees the checkered flag for 6th. Quickly catching in with Helgelien and Cardoso. They're 16 seconds apart here. We see for de Tosto now leading the GT4s, but he's got quite the drive before the end of this race today. We'll wait to see what the full result of it is. It may be the case where the session marker cuts them off and does give us an early doors insight on the race win. As it stands right now, it looks to be going towards the 58 of Timo de Tosto. That'll mark his first win in this series, if I'm not mistaken. Having a look just quickly through our notes, it'll also mark the first McLaren win in quite some time. It was either going to be a coin toss between Ginetta or McLaren in today's race after the incident there for Matthias de Munster disconnecting upon taking the lead under strategy for the last pit stop. Let's have a quick look into it. Matteo Tosto, this is looking to be his first win ever in this series. Didn't compete last season. In terms of McLaren, this is their first GT4 win coming up here. So this is history in the making in this championship by the looks of it. Also denoting as well McLaren's progress in GT3 from last season to today. It is also going to mark, by looks of it there, if I'm not mistaken in my notes findings, this is very likely to be McLaren's first win in this championship outright. It has been a very heartwarming story to see this one here. This is Przemek Zulim. Started halfway down the first lap, joined in ultra late to this session, but was adamant to see round 7, was adamant to compete in round 7, and now is adamant to finish round 7. And that he does, having actually gained position over the course of this race, having survived, having outlived his contemporaries towards the back of the field. Even with the significant disadvantage he faced today, he finds 4th in category at the end of round 7. That is a truly, truly heartwarming story for that. A real journey of perseverance for Zulim. That's fantastic stuff there. One of the best moments of the season was seeing how the little Aston that could make 4th place out of thin air there. That was basically, it was witchcraft to see the Aston do that and pull that off. We see then the last two, the leading pair of GT4, Timo de Tosto and Tom Wells. History in the making here then. Not only the first manufacturer outside of Mercedes to win in GT4 this season, it would also, on either side of it, marked if it were to go into Wells's favour before his fuel miscalculation, that would have been his first win since the start of Season 2. For Timo de Tosto, this is his first HCCL GT4 win, so it stands in this championship at least. And also for the Multiclass Championship, this is the first win for McLaren outright. So this is truly groundbreaking stuff. Normally the session marker kicks in and around that 3rd sector, so I would keep a close eye to the ground on that one. Actually, sorry, the 4th or 5th sector. Thinking back to it as well with the scope of things for Tom Wells, I'd say this is not the, I don't think this should be the straw that breaks the camel's back on his journey with Ginetta. There is still great chances for victory down the line here for Wells. He's come so close to it on many an occasion, today being one among them. The last time we saw this was back in Le Castellet, where he went toe-to-toe to fight with Vladislav Mizin. That was one of the most valiant defenses of the lead I think we've ever seen for the GT4s. So he's still defining the grid with his presence in the number 12. It's a pity then that things did go the way that they did for him in this race. That fuel miscalculation could have decided much else had it been done ever so slightly differently, but he didn't plan for the extra lap. No one plans for the extra lap. A lot of these drivers get this down exactly to the litre for what they need. Anything over that is disastrous for them. You see heading in towards the Schwalbenschwanz and the Kleines Carousel. Tom Wells not too far off the shout then from Timo de Tosto. Those two 11 seconds apart as they make their way on to the Dottinger. Making his way then down the Dottinger. The number 58. Checkered flags await these two then. We've seen the deciding factor on GT3's victory. That has gone to Mr. Scallops, his 4th win this season, breaking 2 rounds of a drought there for race wins. Heading down to the line then, McLaren's first ever win on the horizon, both in and across GT4 and GT3 since the GT3 and GT4 split was introduced to this championship. The first of its kind then, McLaren become a race-winning manufacturer, and heralding its arrival on its first ever win in this series is Timo de Tosto in the number 58 570S, a grand drive then from McLaren today. History defined from the 58. Number 12 sees the checkered flag for second in this race. Tom Wells still reveling in a great result. As it stands, he's actually leading the charge just slightly ahead of De Munster. I don't know if it will be by enough to overtake De Munster, but both of them will be seeing themselves as the 2 standing figures of the GT4 Championship battle. Right in the trailing end here of Season 3. This is going to be a fantastic ending coming up next weekend in Spa. Your race winners there, Mr. Scallops in GT3, Timo de Tosto in GT4. You can see the full results there to your left-hand side. They'll also be published up on the sim grid at a later date. We can see the DNS as well. Gagliolo, Marianelli, Czar and Litti for this race. It was brutal stuff here in the Nürburgring, but when isn't it? And looking into where we'll be next, do ignore the dates there, as it will actually be March 14th that we go to Spa. As today, of course, being March 7th, due to the delays last week that forbid us from being able to run round 7 on time. Completely out of our hands there. That was all on the sort of server, not even server side. It was on sort of developer side issues with the game for, I believe it was for Xbox during last week's debacle. We'll be heading to Spa, though, for round 8 on March 14th for the season finale then of Season 3 of the Multiclass Championship here on HCCL. Coming up in about, looking at it here, so it's about an hour and 20. Actually, an hour and 20 minutes time is our 3rd and final broadcast of today, that being March 7th, 2026. Coming up then, the penultimate round of Season 2 of the NLRL Console Endurance Series. We go back to a fantastic event from last season before the 4 hours of Suzuka. You'll be joining us from Mie Prefecture, Japan in about an hour and 20 minutes. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon. Until then, take care. Good night.